Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Kessner.
And this is Claire Kaplan. Before we get started, I want to remind our listeners that sometimes our conversations can be difficult to hear, especially for survivors of trauma. So we encourage you all to please take care of yourselves, your safety and well-being. Reach out for emotional support from family or friends, a counselor, or even a hotline. Additional resources may be found on the Take Back the Night Foundation website, and I'll share that address with you at the end of the podcast.
Thank you so much, Claire. And our two amazing guests today are Dr. Jo Jones and Deborah Grassman. The two of them have done some incredible visionary work, but we're going to start with, as I usually do, tell us a little bit about each of yourselves and what you do and bio.
All right. Well, I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I worked in hospice for more than 30 years. And during that time, I took care of more than 10,000 dying veterans.
Oh, my goodness, Deborah.
Yes. Now, I've never personally been the victim of sexual trauma, but I've heard story after story about sexual trauma. And, this might surprise you since I'm a hospice nurse, but I can tell you at the end of life, regrets surface, unfinished business surfaces, and that's when I would hear stories of unresolved sexual trauma, whether by the victim or the perpetrator.
Oh, wow.
They're getting ready to meet their maker, so to speak, and sometimes those things come up. And also in my counseling practice, I saw sexual violence a lot, even though most of my clients were not coming to see me for the sexual trauma they had experienced. They were coming to see me for relationship issues or bereavement issues or life transition difficulties. But somewhere along the way, the secret would reveal itself in one way or the other.
Oh, my goodness. And that was Deborah who was speaking just now. And, I think that's such a powerful statement, Deborah, to give us, how important this disclosure is. And I wanted to, when you say end of life, and I'll give you, for our listeners, since they get to know me a lot, Katie Kessner, who's spent 32 years traveling the globe, talking to thousands like you, Deborah. My audiences are 1,000 at a time. My largest was 250,000 people. And I would say one of the things I've learned is what you've learned, and I just want to say it in a different way. The population that I try to impact and persuade to join the cause is often men who are in the late part of their lives with daughters and a wife, and they have lots of money and lots of power. And perhaps whether it be racial, cultural, or other demographic silencers that have never allowed them to talk about sexual violence. It's so interesting what you just said, because of the things that haunt us at the near end of the rope. I feel like it's so telling because I resonate exactly. People talk about this particular issue over almost many others. So I'm excited to talk with you on the podcast today, Deborah, and learn more about that experience, because I think it's really powerful and on lots of levels. So thank you. And Dr. Jo Jones, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a nurse by trade. I work in long-term care. I've been doing this for about 40 years. 40 years. And I have a doctorate in health education. I'm a health education specialist. And what I bring to the table is that I am a survivor of sexual violence at 4 different times in my life, as an infant, a teen, and twice as a young adult. And my mission or my vision is a world without sexual violence. And my mission is to reach the unheard, the silenced, and unseen. And I hope to do that through a relationship with Opus Peace and using their platform of soul injury.
Amazing. So let's talk exactly about Opus Peace. I'm not sure, our listeners probably have no idea what Opus Peace is. So let's start there.
Well, Opus Peace is a nonprofit organization started more than 10 years ago by 5 VA hospice nurses who had learned much wisdom and witnessed much trauma and what have you from veterans that we were caring for at the end of life. And they often would talk about their PTSD and their trauma, but what we were seeing was, and what they were telling us was that they experienced something more than that. And that was that the trauma that they had experienced sometimes caused them to become separated from their own sense of self. That has, if I fast forward to after we started our nonprofit, to take the message forward, because sometimes as we would help these veterans, men and women, at the end of their lives, and we would help them with these, what they called soul injuries, we realized there were basically 3 things that were causing them to lose their sense of self. And it was this: unmourned loss and hurt, unforgiven guilt and shame, and fear of helplessness and loss of control.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to say this like that if this was just simple and straightforward, it just happened. It didn't evolve so as simply as I'm making it sound. But we kept hearing it over time, over years. We kept hearing them talk as they're getting ready to meet their makers, so to speak, and looking back over their whole lifetime of regrets. We kept hearing similar patterns that could be distilled into these 3 causes. And so then our practice changed, because what we started doing was help them mourn their losses and their hurts. We help them forgive their guilt and their shame. And we help them learn how to feel their helplessness over things they had no control over, rather than trying to overly control, trying not to feel it. So that was really the formula that we sort of finally settled upon, and we saw such changes in people at the end of life where they would become peaceful and could have a peaceful death. They would what we call die healed, die with wholeness, so to speak.
If I repeat a question,
and sometimes they would look at us and they would, poignantly, in my mind, say,
with this work you're doing,
why didn't I learn how to do this?
I realize you're working with people who are not necessarily close to death.
Why did I have to be dying in order to learn how to do
that
this?
question or mission of,
and every time I would hear that really struck our team's chord.
Given you feedback or talked about how
it's true. Why can't they? Let's take this forward. So I hope that I adequately represent 10,000 dying veterans and what they have been through, and the wisdom. I want to tell you, wisdom, not knowledge, wisdom emerges at the end of life because the facade comes down. And we define soul injury as a wound to your sense of self, to your real self, in other words, that self that's beyond the facade. And for all of us, as we near death, that facade sort of crumbles, whether you want it to or not. But for all of us, as we're dying, our conscious mind gets weaker and our unconscious mind gets stronger. So whether we want to or not, that facade starts coming down and people get very real at the end of life. And that's the privilege that I have had, is being able to bear witness to that real self behind the facade that comes out naturally, and to be able to see the wisdom. These veterans had wisdom, and they had courage to face those truths about themselves at the end of life. And I would sit there just eating it all up and using it to live my own life.
Well, Deborah and Dr. Jones, before you keep going, I think something that will help our listeners understand where you're headed with your vision and your mission. How do we unlock those 3 stumbling blocks? And what are you doing, Are there books to read? Are there meditations to tell us what are you doing? Yeah, I love your face. You're like, I've got this answer. Tell us more. How, maybe go through
So,
each one. Are the processes unique for each blocking, or are they unique by person? What have you learned?
So Deborah is going to answer that for you. But before we go there, I do want to say that the concepts of soul injury and the concept that Opus Peace and Deborah and these 5 hospice nurses have developed fits so uniquely in the hurt and loss that people who have survived sexual trauma have gone through. They disappear from themselves. They numb out their feelings. And those who are actually doing the work to recover from it, they develop the courage to do that. They develop the humility to do that work, to recover from all of the trauma, all of the hurt that they've sustained over the years, or maybe even just a few moments when they've been sexually violated.
Got it.
So maybe one way to answer this that involves Dr. Joe a lot is this. We started out when we first started our nonprofit, putting on a 4-day Soul Injury Institute to train others to be able to take the message out, because we knew we were just 5 people. Well, this wasn't going to, we have a very lofty, ambitious goal of also changing the world, so to speak. But at any rate, so we put on this 4-day Soul Injury Institute in which we give people self-help tools. We do different exercises, obviously mourning, forgiving, and integrative letter writing, a lot of different holistic tools, and also helping people, as I said, develop the courage to feel their helplessness when they don't have control over something. So the transformation, it can be rather dramatic, and that's really how Dr. Joe's and my path crossed. She ended up hearing one of our licensed educators at a conference speaking about soul injury, and she I'm going to let her tell about what that did, and then she came to the Institute. Our paths crossed. Then she read my books and then contacted me even further. But I'll let her tell that story, because it's a powerful story, because she had locked her 4 different assaults by 4 different people at 4 different times in her lives. She had locked that up for 60 years.
Oh my goodness.
What happened over 4 days, and then the time afterward as she worked her stuff, and she did. I'll let her tell it. This is her story. I'm not going to take it. It's a powerful story.
So I actually saw one of the ambassadors for Opus Peace speak at a geriatric conference in Tucson, Arizona. And on their table of contents were the words soul injury. And when I saw those words, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been feeling this for the last 60 years. And I didn't have a word for it. Didn't have any way to explain how I was feeling. And then I heard the ambassador speak, and I said, this speaks to me. And she invited me to the Soul Injury Institute. And it took me, 3 or 4 times to actually get there. I would sign up and something would happen. And I finally got there, and I went through the Institute, and I heard the stories of other ambassadors as they were talking about their sexual trauma and other traumas as well. And I said, this is something. This really is something. It's not a bunch of hogwash. And actually, when I was there, I was like, oh my God, do I really want to be here? Do I really want to explore what's happening with me? Because I've been living with it for 60 years. And I said, okay, yes, let's do this thing. And then, of course, I got sick for about 2 years. But I finally got back in touch with Deborah. I wrote my story, and she liked it, and we got together and we started collaborating. And this is where we are now.
Amazing. Claire, I've been talking the whole time. What do you want to ask?
Well, and I've been having my technical issues, so I've sort of been in and out. So if I repeat a question, say we answered that, and I'll go on to the next one. This work you're doing, is it? I realize you're working with people who are not necessarily close to death at this point. You're trying to, follow that question or mission of why didn't I do this sooner? Have people given you feedback or talked about how this changed the sort of trajectory of their lives or their relationships with people around them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of our mission is to help people heal the relationship they have with themselves. And we have a model and a way and different tools that they can do that. And of course, once they kind of unleash and I always say shed the impediments that are keeping them from their real self, and they've learned the tools that we're telling them and giving them, but they actually are living them now. And then they become, I would say, instruments of healing for others. And things that used to trigger them are ways that they were, they give up their numbing agents, because so often the very thing that they're running away from is the very thing that'll free them up. And so we create a safe environment for that to occur through that 4-day training. Now, other than that, you're asking about the other venues we have. We have an extensive library of courses online so that people can do it in the privacy of their home or with just a couple of other people. And, a lot of different types of media. It's not just video, but these are all things. And the sexual violence course is going to be premiering in November, and it's Dr. Joe and I doing it together. There's different videos and readings and what have you. So, that allows also to spread the word. But yes, at this point in time, we are way beyond just hospice and veterans. We are way beyond that. And because these tools, these concepts can be contextualized to any population. And as Dr. Joe says, they are perfect with sexual violence because shame often surrounds and encapsulates that original wound. And when you're ashamed of yourself, that's a soul injury. You start questioning, you just, that whole thing, you hide who you really are. And so.
And you shed that guilt as well. The guilt that maybe you did something to cause that sexual injury, soul injury, or the sexual violence.
Dr. Joe often will describe it as that after her numerous injuries, but after each one, she dismembered herself. And then part of the healing was to not only remember what happened, because she was really good at putting it. This woman's a very successful person. She will tell you she lives in a 5-bedroom, 5-bath, 3-story house, takes vacations, drives a Mercedes. She's by anybody's definition very successful. And yet she said inside for 60 years she harbored this sense of shame, inadequacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And guilt and sorrow and hurt. And when I encountered the concepts of soul injury, when I encountered the concept that they have, I felt liberated. I mean, it's hard work. It's not easy. And I've been with you for about 5 or 6 years, and I'm not healed. I'm still on this path of trying to find the hero that I know I have within me.
Dr.
So we call this remembering. She had dismembered parts of herself that became scattered, and then you remember, and then you remember it. Come back into the membership of me, of my wholeness.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Katie.
No, I think that was so powerful what both of you just said. And I also think maybe there's something that you could offer, Dr. Jones, about that remembering and what, I know it must be very helpful to have, Deborah sitting right there next to you, but it's also, I can tell you two are such good, solid friends and colleagues and change the world artists. But
We're on the same mission.
But at the end of each day, Dr. Jones, I think you have such a powerful story to also share with so many times that you've been through abuse. And like, what are some of the main turning points for you where you felt like I can thrive instead of bury or instead of forget? Like, where did you come to this whole soul healing process?
Well, one of the tools that Opus Peace offers us is letter writing. Very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote letters to the entities that I thought were kind of egregious to me, or people that I thought really treated me inappropriately or badly. I didn't write letters of forgiveness, but I am on that road to forgiveness. I wrote a very powerful letter to little Jo, the little girl that had been hurt or abused as a 4-year-old. And what I told her was that I'm giving her the help me with the word.
Permission?
Yes, the permission to cry when she felt like she had to cry, to laugh when she felt like she had to laugh. Those were things that were missing from my life. I was kind of like fake. How I describe it as I was an actor on a stage looking at my life instead of really participating in it. But I gave this little girl permission to express all her emotions and to receive emotions from other people, things that I wasn't doing. And that's all was in relationship to hiding what I was feeling after each of these sexual assaults. After each of these sexual assaults, I was scattered. I was just all over the place.
But Dr. Jones, let me back up on one thing. I mean, I don't want to. I think you were saying so many important things. Like I want to take them piece by piece.
Sure.
Well, one thing I think is after each, and some questions we get from our listeners, they'll say, they'll blame themselves. They'll say, how can this keep happening to me? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that question that we get asked so often.
And that is one of the questions that I actually said, why does this keep happening to me? Statistics say that number one, once you have been assaulted, it's going to be more likely that you'll be assaulted again in your lifetime. But I had to come to the realization that it was not my fault, that these attacks were not because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're not because I was wearing the provocative clothing. They're not because I enticed someone. It's because these perpetrators have a need for power, and they have a need to dominate someone. And once I realized that, then I was able to remove that stigma of it's my fault.
That makes sense. I like that answer a lot. I think it'll help a lot of our listeners, Dr. Jones. Claire, do you have a follow-up to that? I don't know if we have Claire's audio back. My next one.
I was just going to say, Katie, I don't know if you all talk much about secondary wounding. In the literature, that's how it's professionally defined as people's reaction to victims via silence, via ignoring, via blaming, via not responding in a supportive way is secondary wounding. And I've heard so many stories about as bad as the assault was, how the people around them, whether it be the police, whether it be their own family, that was worse. Sometimes at the end of life, when we do forgiveness work, people will say, yeah, as hard as it was to forgive.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. That's a huge point, Deborah. I love it. I love thinking about how do we forgive? And I thought it was really interesting, Dr. Jones, that you said, we are working on this thing called forgiveness. I will answer it this way. People ask me that a lot. Do you forgive the guy who did this to you? And I said, forgiveness means to me it just means like I'm going to go on. I'm like, I don't need to ask for your forgiveness, because I think sometimes we need to tell ourselves the perpetrators and those who do harm need to wrestle with their own soul. I don't need to forgive you, because until you wrestle with it yourself, it's not my job to tell you what to think or that you're forgiven. It's like, I'm going to go on and I'm going to figure it out, but you need to wrestle on your own. But that's just me, Deborah and Dr. Jones. What do you think of what I just said?
Well, I think that for most people, and for me, that you have to make the decision as to whether you want to forgive or not. No one can force you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you make that decision, when you say you're ready to forgive, you'll know. And then for some people, forgiveness is not an option, especially, and Deb, you can probably verbalize this better than I can, but especially if that perpetrator is still in your midst, or if they were a friend or a family member. But I'm going to let Deborah, because she's more expert on the subject of forgiveness than I am.
Well, I think, Katie, you're right on point. Forgiveness is what liberates you. It's an interior process within you, so you can come to peace with that. But what I'll tell you, here's my little soapbox, because I have seen this a lot, and I just cringe every time I do. I hear well-intentioned people telling victims.
I've never seen your face.
You know what I'm getting?
You're like, well-intentioned people. Audience.
Yeah.
You should. Deborah's awesome. So is Dr. Jones. They're so passionate. I love it. Sorry, go.
Well, I have often witnessed directly well-intentioned people trying to help victims say, oh, you have to forgive. You need to forgive him. You need to whatever. You need to let that go. That's it. All those kinds of things. Excuse me. And they end up almost putting pressure on the person. Now this victim feels like, oh, there must be something wrong with me that I can't forgive them. So now they, on top of everything else, they feel guilty that they can't forgive, or they feel like it's implied that they're lazy. They're not doing the work. If you had the courage to forgive, Joe, then, this would be done. And that, forgiveness, number one, is a process, and it's not, you're exactly right. It's not about liberating the other person. It is about liberating yourself. And there are many complicating factors. With some things, it is fairly simple and straightforward, the way everybody makes it sound when they're giving that advice. Sexual violence, there's so many different layers. There's so many different factors. And when I help people do that type of inner forgiveness work, I always say, let's just divide it up into little pieces. And when you're ready, you'll know when it's time to address that. And that really helps people, I think, a lot recognize that this is a process. It may take a lifetime, if ever that it is. And there should be no pressure put on people that they have to forgive if they're going to attain peace. Anyway, you can hear the angst in my voice because I hear.
But Deborah, I think what you just said was so perfect, and I just want to say it again for our listeners, and correct me if I said it wrongly. But I think we need to stop pressuring victims to check boxes that some kit gives us that says, like, all you have to do is forgive. Meditate. Like, I'm thinking of all this stuff. Like, it's like, just meditate, just do some self-care, just use some lavender oil, get your hair done and get a facial. Oh my God, sexual violence is a breeze. Now you thrive. Like, I am so done with that. It's so much
Well,
more
I tell you the other
complicated.
one. Well, while I'm on a soapbox, the other one is
Go.
you just need to be more resilient. Now,
Nice.
I would tell you, you just need to build resilience. Like you can infuse this, and I always
Just
say, and
drink
this is
some
the
hot
power of
coffee and burn your
How about
tongue.
find your passion again?
find your passion again. Yeah.
Like
Well,
now we can do all the platitudes. I love it. Maybe eat some green juice. All right. This is so fun. Like, go, Claire, go.
And that is, I mean, the whole notion around forgiveness really comes out of particular faith, because it's not the same across the board. And it's not just from, I think the idea of you have to forgive really comes from, if it's family or something, it's like because they're uncomfortable with the relationship that's now happening now with this problem, right? They want to get rid of the problem by telling the victim, right, that they have to somehow forgive and make it go away. But there's also institutions that do that.
Oh, yeah.
so
And you have to forgive, this is what, our faith values. You forgive without giving the person a chance to recover.
yeah, I want to make sure your audience knows that I am definitely a proponent of forgiveness. I've got a documentary film about forgiveness that'll be coming out soon. I mean, but it's more of how to reckon. It's more of a reckoning process. And,
right. Yes.
The whole idea is to reckon with those scattered pieces of your own self within your own self, which also has to do with self-forgiveness, obviously. But anyway, I do just want to make the point, when you hear me so strong about how not to forgive and how, trust yourself in the process, I find there's a rhythm, there's a readiness. And I always often work with people more about cultivating the desire. See, we never talk about that with forgiveness, cultivating the desire to want to forgive. Victims, especially initially, like, why would I ever want to forgive him or her that did that? Why would I ever want to forgive him? And Katie, you said it perfectly. Well, it's not about him. No, they don't deserve it. And no, that's on their soul. And when they come to their deathbed, let me tell you, it'll probably surface at that time.
Yeah.
But the but is you want to forgive for yourself, to release yourself, because
maybe we need but how about this, Deborah and Dr. Jones? We need a different word. To me, this is the word forgiveness has been around for 50 years. I think there's a different word. We need to invent a new word for this process. And it's not, there are like 100 words for snow in Greenland. Like in other languages, there are lots of nuanced words that are much more precise for the process or the touch or the sensation, the experience, the whole captivation. And I think sometimes we as Americans get very language lazy. And so I feel like I loved our riff on like how many overused trite ways, but I also think we could develop a new word, just like, your words about soul injury, like those concepts are much better and they're clearer. And I think we should replace forgiveness. And I'm thinking, the forgiveness, it's giving of self, but I think it's not it's self-giveness. It's not forgiveness, not for you. It's for me. It's self-giving, self-giveness.
Well, really, when I think about Dr. Joe and the whole idea of dismembering, forgiveness is about remembering, bringing your scattered piece of self that was exiled into unconsciousness when you tried to forget the rape that happened or whatever. It's remembering it, bringing it back into unity. So we're actually talking about a process to integrate scattered pieces of self, to bring them back home. We call it, Katie, re-owning the scattered piece of self. You have to acknowledge it, validate its suffering, and then to rehome it. To rehome that scattered piece of self means I have to create a safe, place for it to come back home. So if I'm ashamed of that part of myself, it should stay out and unconscious because it's not safe here with me. So that's really a key ingredient. Now, going back to forgiveness, let me tell you one more. I love what you're saying about a different word. Let me tell you about one of my sticklers that I have about the process. So when we talk about forgiveness and doing the reckoning work of doing that, what happens is oftentimes the wrong part of self is doing the forgiving. So if you think about, you have your conscious self that's kind of in charge of, all these scattered pieces of self. And the conscious adult self says, oh, I forgave him, that he did this to me, 10 years, in your case, 50 years ago. I forgive it. I've done that. Okay. Well, guess what? That's the wrong part of self that does the forgiving. This adult self didn't have the violation. It was that 4-year-old self, that hurt self. So you have to go to that scattered piece of self. They're the ones that has the authority to forgive, not you, who's so successful. And that's that facade that's been covering that 4-year-old up. But we just help people. And it's not that hard, Katie. I know I may be sounding like this. It's not that hard. You just acknowledge that 4-year-old, for example. When you hear the letter that Dr. Joe wrote, you'll totally get it. But when that 4-year-old finally gains a voice and can speak up and say, I'm hurting, and you've covered me up. You've silenced me. Not only did everybody else silence me, but you've been ashamed of me for 50 years. You've shut me up too. Okay. And then you write a letter back that says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I did that to you. I want to listen to you now. So that's how you liberate that 4-year-old. And then the 4-year-old does the work of forgiving. See, that's authentic forgiveness as opposed to the other, which I call pseudo forgiveness, where the part that's not hurting anymore because they've dismembered it and numbed it out with good numbing agents. They think, oh, I've done the forgiveness work. No, the wrong part of self. You have to go, the hurt part, the part of self that was violated has to do the work. And the adult self, you're scared of her. Don't be scared of her. See, this whole thing gets set in motion because we are fundamentally, as a society and as individuals, we are afraid of emotional pain. So much of the work that Opus Peace does is to help people stop being afraid of their emotional pain. Pain is part of life. It is here. It's meant to be felt. And when you can start feeling it instead of numbing it out, that's how you create a safe place for scattered pieces of self to come back home, including, the good parts, the bad parts, the ugly parts, the beautiful parts that can all be integrated back together again.
No, I love it. I love it. Claire, I know, and we could talk to you all for hours. I'm just thinking, how do we give some takeaways? Claire, do you have any thoughts?
I would ask if you might have just a couple of suggestions for people who are just maybe not quite at the process of even considering that whole notion of forgiveness, or they're struggling with it, and just a couple of things you might say to them.
Well, for one thing, I would tell them to consider letting go of any guilt that they may have, any shame that they may have. Because as I said before, sexual assault is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. It is all on that perpetrator. So forgive yourself for feeling the shame, for feeling the guilt. I would say that's the first part.
And, one of the famous researchers is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. You're probably familiar with his work with trauma. And, one of the things he says, and of course, Brené Brown talks a lot about shame, and there is so much shame. And oftentimes people will say, oh, you shouldn't feel ashamed. Don't feel ashamed. And van der Kolk and Brown basically say, hey, we don't tell people to not. We all have a shamer in our head. We all have a shamer in our head. Better to bring that shamer out of the dark into the light so we can see how it's impacting, let's see what this is all about. So, I think one thing is just to be able to let ourselves be vulnerable and speak, this is how I feel ashamed. So it can start being that piece of self can start being remembered, and being able to not be able to have a voice to say what it wants to say. One of the things I would say, it's some very cogent, tangible things that can be done. Number one, on February 2nd, which is Groundhog's Day, and this is the reason we do a free 1-hour webinar, followed by a very important tool that we call the Anchoring Your Heart tool. We do this every year worldwide, hundreds of people joining together for the webinar, followed by a grounding technique where we all zero in on what is going on within our own heart. And there's just a very simple 3-step process. It only takes 2 minutes to do that we do together. Very powerful. The reason we do it on Groundhog Day is because, the groundhog comes out and sees its shadow, and we all have a shadow, the parts of ourself that we don't like, that we stick in our shadow. Carl Jung coined that word, but we all have a shadow that we don't like. And a lot of sexual trauma victims stick the shame and everything else in their shadow self. And so on February 2nd, we talk about the reason we do it on that day is because it signifies that unconscious shadow, and we teach people how to make peace with whatever is, to stop being afraid of the emotional pain and to just let themselves feel whatever is in their heart at that moment. Very powerful day. And so that's something easy that can be done. As I said, we have several courses. I would encourage people to go on our website, which is Opus, O-P-U-S, Peace, Peace.org. And we have an online learning library that we call Masterpiece. And you can click on that, get into the library and all different courses. The sexual violence one will be released in just 2 short months, but we have lots of other courses on soul injury, on trauma, on loss, on forgiveness, on helplessness, on veteran issues. An extensive library there. I also have 2 books. One's called The Hero Within, and that is very much on interior healing and changing the relationship, healing the relationship you have with yourself. The other one is called Peace at Last, and it's veteran oriented. And we have a 3rd book on soul injury that will be coming out in 2024. The other thing, Dr. Joe and I just did an all-day 6-hour workshop just 2 days ago on sexual violence, and that we have recorded, and it is available online. I think the price was $49.95, something like that. So at any rate, and the Masterpiece courses, self-learning courses, those prices are $49 for either of the courses, or you can get both of the courses, part 1 and part 2, for $75 and get both. So those are the things that come to my mind initially that are easy for your audience to access anywhere that they are. And of course, the 4-Day Soul Injury Institute, if they're interested in being a catalyst for other people, they come out of the 4-day leadership with a jump drive with 17 different presentations that they can plug and play and take out into their workplace and out into their community and their families and anybody else, to be an agent of peace and healing.
I was going to ask Joe and Deborah you to wrap things up, but that was kind of darn good. Thank you for being prepared.
That was great.
And we now have like a ton of stuff to tell our audience, and we will definitely link to as many of those as we can through the website when we drop the episode. So we're just I'm delighted to host you both. It was such a great conversation, and we did so much in so little time, and we could have, like you just said, you talked for like 6 hours. I know I can understand how you captivated everyone, and your passion just is infectious. And you've come up with so many important ways for people to find courage and and strength and healing on terms that really work. So I'm super excited to drop your episode. Claire, do you want to add any? And Dr. Joe, do you Jones? I was like calling you Dr. Joe. And Deborah, is there anything else?
That's what I call her.
Dr. Joe, well, is there anything you two want to add? And thank you also, Dr. Joe, for your courage and strength through all you've been through.
Well, thank you. The only thing I want to add is that Deborah and I are both available for in-person workshops and online workshops as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Great.
Claire, anything else and close us out?
I don't have anything else to add or question. Deborah, did you want to say something?
I kind of do. Just one quick thing. It's not for me at all, but in a way, it so represents how we approach. In just our conversation about forgiveness makes me think that this might be helpful. You're probably already familiar with that book, Where I Stopped, written by Martha Ramsey, where she chronicles her recovery after she was raped at age 13. And, she spent decades living a counterfeit life as she tried to forget what had happened. But I love a quote in that book, and it so describes how we at Opus Peace approach sexual violence. And this is one of the lines that she writes. She says, "You will not be healed, but your consciousness can embrace the whole of your hurt self." Wow, I'm going to just say that again. You will not be healed, but your consciousness can embrace the whole, WHOLE, the whole of your hurt self. And that is exactly what we at Opus Peace want to do. That's our goal, is to give people an experience of themselves, their real self, to be able to release their fears of who they are and who they are not.
Beautiful. All right, Claire.
That's fantastic. That's a great quote to end on. Yes.
You can have us back anytime. We've got a lot more to say if you want to have us back for part 2.
We do. I know we will. Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Jones and Deborah, for joining us today and sharing your stories and your work. It's so important, and I know that our listeners will really appreciate it. Thanks also to the amazing group of volunteers who help us put this podcast together and make it get done and out into the world. And thank you to all of our listeners, who are here to bear witness. Help us help other survivors by subscribing to the podcast and sharing it far and wide on your social media. And please follow us on our Facebook page and our Instagram pages. If you need support but don't know where to find it, visit takebackthenight.org for a list of resources and information on how to reach our legal support hotline. Remember that self-care is essential to healing and to thriving.
Thanks so much, Claire. And again, final thanks to Deborah and Dr. Jones. And we look forward to definitely a part 2. And to our listeners, please continue to stay tuned. Follow us, join us, and thrive and survive together. We will shatter the silence and end the violence. Take care.